And that jarring cacophony tells you you're listening to the Power of Three podcast. It's Christmas week as this episode drops. You may be listening to this at another time of the year, but hey, we're bringing it out in time for Christmas because thematically it feels cold. We're talking about The Algebra of Ice by Lloyd Rose, a BBC Past Doctor Adventures novel released back in the mists of time. I'm Kenny Smith, and today we're looking, as I said, at The Algebra of Ice, the 66th novel in the BBC PDA range. It was released on the 6th of September 2004 and featured not just the 7th Doctor and Ace, but Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart. Hurrah for the Brig! What can we tell you about this one? Well, Lloyd Rose was the writer of the 8th Doctor Adventures, The City of the Dead and Camera Obscura, as well as the 8th Doctor audio Kildroya, and a lot of people had said of her EDAs they were very much like new adventures. So this is what happened when Lloyd got to write for the 7th Doctor and Ace. And the book also had an illustrated preview in DWM number 347, which was illustrated by Darryl Joyce. And if you have a look on our social media this week, you should be able to see what that looked like. So let's have a look at the book itself. It's got the proper blue version of the TV movie logo in that sort of lovely solid blue, not the sort of faux metallic look. And it's set against an equally blue cover. There's some snow-covered mountains in the background, and in the foreground we can see there's some ice, and on it there appears to be some sort of pattern burned into it. But what can it mean? Let's have a look on the back cover and see what it tells us. A maths genius nerd, a weird web scene publisher, and the Doctor's old ally, the Brigadier, find themselves helping the Doctor and Ace solve what should be a simple puzzle. The appearance of a crop circle in the Kentish countryside. Hardly uncommon, but there are some peculiar features. It's not a circle, but a series of square-sided shapes. It's filled with ice, and it draws the Doctor and Ace into a confrontation with a reality right next to zero. This adventure features the 7th Doctor and Ace, and the book was priced $5.99 on its release. So let's pause briefly before we speak to the author, and let's have an excerpt from the novel, and this has been read for us by Craig Brawley.
You say there was more ice. The Doctor was poking at the ground with his umbrella, humming tunelessly to himself. With the aerial photographs in hand, he had slowly paced the whole pattern, stopping now and then to look back along his route. The Brigadier didn't see the point in this personal reconnaissance, but he followed patiently. The Doctor had his own way of doing things. As they walked, Lethbridge Stewart examined his old friend. Even after several years, he wasn't yet quite used to this latest incarnation. The changes were always so extreme. This was the gravest of the personalities the Brigadier had known. Stern, the Highlands accent made Lethbridge Stewart think of a Scots elder, and somehow troubled. He seemed tenser than usual this trip. Yes, it was originally about 2 inches thick. Hasn't gone down much, not under this sun. Lethbridge Stewart nodded. The pale winter light held no heat. And the depth of the track itself has been measured. Yes, it's consistent. Oddly consistent, in fact, except where the lines break off. They were standing at one of these dead ends now, where the earth was violently gouged. The gash was over 1 metre deep. I'd almost been done with a gigantic claw, Lethbridge Stewart observed. Nothing organic made this, said the Doctor grimly. He rifled through the photographs again. The haphazardness of the patterns is confusing? Not at all. The Doctor handed him the pictures. Look closely. None of the shapes is completed. Almost there, but not quite. As if someone tried several times and didn't get it right. There was a long pause. Then the Brigadier said slowly, You mean that... The Doctor nodded. Something was trying to come through. Hello, called a voice. The two men turned to see a stocky figure running towards them. Damn, said Lethbridge Stewart. Who is it? A journalist, more or less. Writes for one of those nonsense web magazines. Complete idiot. The Doctor tapped the handle of his umbrella against his chin, watching the man approach. Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, Mulcross panted as he came up. "Just the man I wanted to see." He nodded at the doctor, who smiled and raised his hat. Lethbridge Stewart did not make introductions. "I'm busy at present, Mulcross." "More investigating, I see. What have you found out?" "Nothing new since this morning." From the corner of his eye, the Brigadier saw that the doctor had somehow concealed the photographs about his person. "There'll be a press announcement when we know more." "Oh yes," Mulcross said sarcastically. "We all know how much to trust government press announcements." "Really, Mulcross, you should be in the States. They have all sorts of phenomena there, UFOs, Bigfoot, some monster that eats goats, a whole area devoted to government cover-ups of alien visitations." "Well, I'm not in the States, am I? And neither is this crop pattern." "Who are you?" Mulcross said rudely to the doctor. The doctor only smiled. "A scientific advisor," said Lethbridge Stewart stiffly. "I don't have any more time for you, Mulcross, and as of 1800 hours, this will be a restricted site." He strode away. The doctor, after tipping his hat again, followed him. "So, Doctor," the Brigadier said as they drove off, "what did you want to see me about?"
Thank you very much, Craig. And now, without further ado, let's cross the Atlantic to New York City and speak with Lloyd Rose. Now, this was recorded over a phone line, so please excuse the sound quality. I have tried my best to clean it up digitally. So, let's see what happens.
My name is Lloyd Rose. I wrote 3 Doctor Who novels, The City of the Dead, Camera Obscura, and The Algebra of Ice.
Now, I think that anybody who's read your 8th Doctor novels would have detected a bit of a feel for new adventures and a bit of a love for them in there. So, was writing a 7th Doctor novel something that you were very keen to do?
Yes, because my introduction to the Doctor Who novels was primarily through the new adventures. When I saw, I don't remember how long ago, I saw a past Doctor adventure in a bookstore and went online finding out what the heck was going on, and quickly discovered, the existence of the new adventures and the writers of the new adventures, and began ordering books by Kate Orman and Paul Cornell and reading them. And that was really how I came back to Doctor Who, from reading those books, not from reading the 8th Doctor adventures. And they have, obviously, they're a very distinctive tone. Darker, more downbeat, grim. The 2 8th Doctor novels that I wrote are fundamentally optimistic, and that Doctor is fundamentally a winner. The 7th Doctor can't really be described accurately as someone who is fundamentally a winner.
Definitely not. So having been published, was it a case of asking Justin Richards as editor, would it be possible to do a 7th Doctor book?
No, I don't even remember. I think it was simply that I had the idea in my head and just ran it past him, and he said, "Oh yeah, go for it." And that idea happened to be a 7th Doctor idea. I think that's really all there was to it.
Yeah, because I think that the whole context of it, when you've got a webzine publisher, a maths genius, and of course somebody who's of nefarious morals, shall we say, it all comes together to make a rather classic Doctor Who mix.
Yes, of that period, of the New Adventures period, it's definitely the traditional mix.
And throwing the Brigadier in there as well, of course.
Oh, I had to. I thought, oh dear, this is a bit old-fashioned, isn't it? But what the hell, yes. I added him in, and the house on Allen Road, and I don't even remember what all I just grabbed and threw in the mix.
Oh, it all works. It definitely feels very New Adventures.
Oh, good.
So what was your starting point for this one? Because I'd imagine that having maths being corrupted and the creation of these crop circles but squares with ice and fields, it's a very visual image. It's almost quite X-Files.
of it. It is. Did they ever do a crop circle one?
Not that I can think of.
I know when Supernatural did their parody X-Files, they did it with a crop circle. But I don't think the X-Files themselves ever dealt with that. You know, it's funny, I'm trying to remember how this one came together. Because it begins with these time glitches that disturb the Doctor, and he thinks, oh, well, I've got to find out why this is happening. You know, the death of Poe, etc. I don't remember exactly at what point. I know I was interested in doing something with mathematics. And since I don't know anything about mathematics, I read a whole hell of a lot and hoped that I understood it. I have not yet been caught out. I'm waiting. Sooner or later, someone's going to read it and go, oh, you know, this is just complete rubbish. I mean, obviously, in the science fiction story part of it, it is complete rubbish. But all the other talk about mathematics, I just hope I got it right. And as I say, I haven't been caught out yet, and I wasn't caught out by any of the people who read it in manuscript. And the idea of mathematics is kind of this cold, perfect world, which in some ways seems to be the world that the Seventh Doctor, in a way, wishes he belonged to, or he wishes the world were like that. He wishes it worked out like that, and of course it doesn't. And then the whole thing came in about, you know, the Doctor and who he is, and the whole wintertime setting, the glacier setting, the cold. It is all through the novel. It takes place in the cold, and it's about the Doctor, and it's about the cold inside of him, as he says to Ethan at the very end, that the aliens found something in him that they recognized. So that was all coming together, and then I also had, when I got the idea that, you know, there's this problem with the Doctor, as it were, a splinter of ice in his heart, then of course I thought of the fairy tale, The Snow Queen, which begins, I don't know how often you've reread Hans Christian Andersen, but it begins with this mirror being broken, and a magical mirror of sorts, and a splinter of glass goes into the eye of this little boy and changes him completely, and he's kidnapped by the Snow Queen to live in her palace of ice, and his best friend, little Kay, comes after him and rescues him, and, you know, you can see obviously how that, I turned that into the story of the Doctor and Ace in the last part of the book.
Very much so, yes. I haven't read it in a few years, not since my daughter was wee, but yes, I can see that now you mention it.
Yeah, it's a good one. I have mixed feelings about Hans Christian Andersen, who upset me tremendously when I read him as a child, but some of them I did like, and The Snow Queen was always one of them that stuck with me.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting contrast between Ethan Amberglass and Patrick Unwin, the two mathematicians who are both maths genii, but both flawed in very different ways.
Yeah, it was strange. It was not until I got to the end of the book and that final conversation that Ethan has with the Doctor, and he realizes, and the Doctor has said that all of them are afraid of life except for Ace, and they all try to hide from it in different ways. They just can't take it head on. And poor Ethan, I knew from the beginning that Ethan's condition, that he had a brain tumor and that it was going to end with his death. I did not, however, expect to invent 3 other original characters and end up killing them all. That was kind of a surprise. I mean, obviously the villains, Unwin and Brett, have to go. But Mulcross, I didn't know that about Mulcross. In fact, Mulcross was the most surprising thing in the book to me, because I invented him just as a sort of joke, as a parody of a certain kind of fan.
Yep.
And then he sort of takes over and becomes interesting, and in some ways is the hero of the book. I mean, I know it's about Ethan. It's certainly about Ethan and what he suffers and what threatens him and how he survives it. But the person who makes the journey and changes is Mulcross. And of course, Mulcross in the end saves the day by heroically sacrificing himself and going splat. But he was a nice surprise. I began to really enjoy working with him and also springing him on people, because he absolutely drove them crazy when he showed up. And that was always kind of nice.
Yeah, I think there's something of the Doctor Who fan in him that I think that we can all relate to, his obsession about wanting to know everything and getting all the facts that he wants, and his meticulous filing system as well.
Yeah, he's, on the one hand, he has, I worked, as you know, at a newspaper. I worked for the Washington Post, although I was a critic, not a journalist. So on the one hand, Mulcross has about him a bit of the satire of the journalists and their idea of what kind of truth seekers they are. But on the other hand, Mulcross turns out actually to be a seeker. He's a bit of a mystic and a visionary. And he has a happy ending from his point of view. And that strange thing he said, which kind of surprised me early on after, he's the first encounter with the aliens trying to come through, and Mulcross loses his hand. But he realizes what he's encountered. He realizes what's happening. And I think it's the Doctor that he says it was worth losing a hand for. And, I read that and I thought, good Lord, he means it. And then I thought, well, and he's right, isn't he? From his point of view, it was worth losing a hand for. At that point, he became a much more powerful character.
Yeah, I think that
it's much more interesting to write.
Yeah, he really sort of comes alive once he's lost his hand.
Mm-hmm.
It just feels that sort of the character really picks up then. He stops being the annoying sort of comedy character in the background, but actually becomes a lot more rounded because he's got anger in him as well there.
Yeah, and the determination to just get to the bottom of this. And it's kind of charming, really, because he assumes that the whole establishment is against him. And, of course, the whole establishment doesn't care about him. But in terms of the plot, all the villains are against him. And he just plunges right in. He just keeps going. I ended up kind of fond of him. He surprised me. None of the other characters I've ever made up for a book have done that. They've all kind of done what I expected him to do. But Mulcross sort of blossomed, changed shape.
Yeah, particularly when he shows up in the TARDIS unexpectedly, and Ace's reaction is, "Oh no."
Oh no, it's not, please. And then, of course, and when he's there at the end, when Brett has burned his back, and now Brett's turned into whatever, he's turned into. He's apparently dead. And so Ethan's sort of just lying there, and of course, Mulcross finds him. He gets no peace. Until, of course, the very end, when he gets his coma.
Yeah.
Which is not meant to be a mean and ironic end for him. It feels a bit more like it than it should, because earlier on in the book, a couple of times, I had him say, is he never to get any peace, or all people always to be barging in on me? And I didn't mean to write something that ironically said, oh, you don't want anybody to barge in on you? I'll show you. I'll give you a coma. That wasn't in there at all. But I did try to imply that, terrible as that ending is, he is not suffering through that ending. And of course, in the end, the Doctor gives him that beautiful gift.
Definitely. Now, talking of the Doctor, how did you find writing for him as well as Ace and indeed the Brigadier? Were they sort of easy to capture?
Oh, well, I loved it. They're very well defined. The Brigadier practically writes himself. And the Seventh Doctor's very, very well defined, both by McCoy's performance and by Andrew Cartmell's work with him. He's just right there. And it was interesting because the Eighth Doctor isn't. Basically what we've got with him is that one television movie and Paul McGann. That's what you have. And I remember feeling cautious about what I did with him, because he was rather uncreated, and I didn't want to make strong choices that turned out to be the wrong choices. So I just sort of kept him, optimistic and kept him, gave him plots in which he came out on top. And he was, the Eighth Doctor's very compassionate. In a couple of cases, particularly in City of the Dead, his compassion is his great strength. It's what saves him. Whereas, of course, the Seventh Doctor is a cold-blooded little thing.
How about Ace? How did you find her?
Ace, again, she's pretty well written, and she's well played, so she's just kind of right there. And there's something very pleasant about writing a character who, in fact, this isn't meant to be as offensive as it sounds, who in fact, just has no common sense. I mean, this girl has no sense of self-protection. She just goes for it. And they're great fun to write. You have to be very careful that, you don't accidentally kill them, or they don't accidentally get killed. But she's just all impulse, all purity. She's very honest. And she's just right there, cutting through it all. And so it's kind of fun to write her. You can't really build plots around her because Ace, basically, she's like her Nitro Knight. She just comes in and explodes the plot line. But she was fun. And again, I thought very clearly created by the writers and the actress.
Yeah. And of course, she got to have a relationship with Ethan.
Yes. Bless her heart. And I thought that, one, Ace is a happily lusty girl. And two, I thought, Ethan needs a break. Let's at least give him this. It's problematic if you try to think about Ethan as a realistically created character. Whether he would even be capable of having that kind of spontaneous, easy relationship with a woman that much unlike him, and so suddenly. But I thought, what the heck? It's a story. It's going to happen. And I was glad for them.
Yeah, I think it was good. It was nice to see Ace being happy for once, instead of being tortured.
Oh, yeah, horrible. The thing about Doctor Who is, the Doctor himself, throughout the whole series, the Doctor is always getting tortured a lot. And, of course, comes through it very well. Which he kind of has to, because the show is going to run for 20-something years. But when I was dealing with Ethan, who was just sort of a regular guy, and not only that, but a small human being, and an intellectual who gets thrown into this horrible situation, and I thought, this would be extremely rough on just an ordinary human being pulled into it. And I wanted to convey that. At the same time, I didn't want to make him either too weak or too strong under those rather terrible circumstances.
Yeah. Now, something that I really liked was we don't get to find out too much about the villain of the piece, the ice equation. And I thought that was, an interesting thing to do, a being from another dimension trying to break through into ours. And it's not fully explained. A bit of mystery there.
It's not explained because the writer didn't figure out how to explain it. I mean, I'm sorry, there's nothing else to say. I just sort of thought, well, I'll just try to make this work. I mean, in any reasonable sense, of course, the whole plot is complete nonsense. But I thought, let's just go with it, because it certainly works symbolically. And I loved the idea of someone hacking the TARDIS. I just thought, why hasn't this happened yet? It was bad. Something happened, and this is how it would happen. And then the whole idea that you can have an earworm, a tune in your ear that turns out to have a mathematical meaning and turns out to be indicative of the fact that the TARDIS has been hacked, etc., etc. I just kept playing with it and having a lot of fun.
Yeah. Something that I also enjoy is the contrast in the locations, where you've got rural England in the Kentish countryside and then going to the ice of Switzerland.
Yeah, because the Kentish countryside that the doctor gazes at that time when he goes out on that walk, the Kentish Weald, I think it's called officially, it is extraordinarily beautiful and gentle and, rather fairy tale-ish. I mean, for heaven's sake, I think the Ashdown Forest, where the Pooh stories are set, that's in Kent, isn't it?
I believe so, yep.
And then, you go to the place of ice. And then finally, when you go into when the doctor goes into the world created by the graph, you go into the literal place of ice, where he's building that, whatever that ridiculous machine made of ice is that he's building, which is, of course, a nonsense machine. It's not ever going to do anything.
Mm-hmm. Something that I have done since reading the book was looking into sort of the prime numbers and their relationships, and the fact that that mathematical problem has still not been solved, even with computers today. Incredible.
They've just never... And, I think while I was working on this, they did solve... A couple of guys using a computer did solve one of the famous mathematical unsolved problems. Which one, Lloyd? I can't remember right now. I'm sorry. And I thought, well, I'm glad it wasn't this one. Because I did sort of poke around and try to find one that it didn't seem like anyone was going to get to the bottom of soon. Although, really, how would you tell? I just looked out. No, it's still a mystery. And, at the end, the doctor says no one will know this for hundreds of years. And he may be right. They just haven't worked out a way to get to it. But then they do astonishing things. I'm working at a disadvantage because I'm fascinated by mathematics and the implications of mathematics, and yet I myself can barely calculate. Algebra just completely baffles me. I sometimes, to this day, as time goes by, find out that multiplication is sometimes just a pain. I mean, I have no feel for mathematics at all, which is the one reason I did so much reading about it, to try and be sure I wasn't making a fool of myself with this story. But the ideas behind math are so fascinating. I mean, where they exist? Why do the mathematical rules? Why do they work? And when you try to read about quantum physics, which is always rather difficult, and you understand that basically the whole language that the physicists work and think in is mathematical calculations that people who write about quantum physics then try to translate into English so that the rest of us can understand it. And not surprisingly, it never quite works. Last thing I read about quantum physics was they now think maybe they've got the neutrino wrong. Do you know what that means? I don't know what that means.
I don't have a mathematical badge for excellence, sadly.
No, nor do I. Or a physics background.
Yeah, I like physics, but I don't understand it.
I'm terrible at math, and my physics was limited. I did learn about entropy in high school, in middle school, I guess you'd say. Same. And then actually our physics teacher's quite good. He had us do the famous experiment where you send the light through these slits, and sometimes it's a wave and sometimes it's a particle.
Yes.
So, I've actually done that experiment, and that experiment, of course, is the whole problem. That's what they've been trying to explain when they try to, as you know, combine what they call classical physics now and quantum physics, and they just can't make them fit together.
I'm glad it's not our problem. But something I noticed was the Doctor making a mention to Ethan that he's just visited both his own mind and the moon. It's fascinating to see the wee reference to Time Worm at Revelation near the end.
Oh, that's right, yes. Yes, a little tip of the hat.
Yep. It was good. It ties it all together, BBC Books and Virgin. So what did you think of the cover, Lloyd, when you first saw that?
I like it very much. I think I was extremely lucky with all three of my covers. I mean, the one for the City of the Dead, I actually provided that photograph of St. Louis Cemetery No. 1. And the artist, I don't even know the name of the artist, who said, oh, well, I know what I'll do with this. It's a marvelous cover. And the one for Camera Obscura, I think, is extremely beautiful. And I would never have thought that that would be the cover. You know, the Camera Obscura in the distance, and then the rose losing its petals in the foreground. It's just extraordinary. And then Algebra of Ice is just terrific. So abstract, so cold, so odd. They've got very, I mean, I know a lot of writers who have published a lot of books, and I think I'm about the luckiest person with covers of anyone I've ever met.
It's a beauty, I think, the fact you've got that pattern in the ice and then the mountains in the background. It really sells it. Yeah, it does. I mean, that's just, they've got I mean, this is 25 years ago, obviously, but they had a great design team there for their covers at BBC Books in those days. Yeah. So here we are. We're talking 21 years since publication. So how do you look back on the whole Algebra of Ice experience?
I enjoyed it. It was quite different from the other two. I knew when I finished it that it was an odd one, and in some senses would be found, and I think has been found by many fans, unsatisfying. Because in the Eighth Doctor novels, I had so much freedom, and particularly in the second one, when I just, it's like, oh, let's set it in Victorian times, and, you know, let's just go all over the place and do all this stuff, and it felt very rich and Doctor Who-ish. Algebra of Ice is narrower and darker, and it's not as nice a book as the first two. It's not meant to be unpleasant, but it's just, everybody keeps dying in it. Which I must tell you, as I said earlier, was kind of a surprise to me. It's just dark, and I think it's very true to the idea of the New Adventures.
I think that's very fair. Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Oh, great!
Massive thanks to Lloyd for her time once again. And we have previously featured one of her novels on the podcast before, so if you want to hear about what she had to say about Camera Obscura, please do look it up. Now, let's have a second reading from the book, again courtesy of Craig Brawley.
The emptiness in front of him thickened, like mist if mist could be solid and was utterly white. It began to shift horizontally, like shuffling abacus beads, putting itself together, the doctor thought, calculating itself into a presence. He didn't see, probably couldn't have seen, the moment it manifested, only found himself looking up at a towering dead white being with long hair and neutral eyes, wearing an equally dead white garment that made the doctor think of a winding sheet. It had taken humanoid form, masking its geometry so well that no trace of sharp angle was visible. The doctor raised his hat. It inclined its head. "Will this do?" Its voice was thin and toneless, and it spoke in unaccented Gallifreyan. "I see you. Can you look on me?" "You're quite clear, thank you," said the doctor. The being smiled. Though its slenderness was bird-like, the overall impression was of strength. "I trust I am sufficiently numerical," the doctor said politely. "Yes, interesting equations, many irrational and impossible numbers." "I should think so. Does that bother you? Possibly you find it a bit threatening?" The being didn't reply, nor did its expression change. "Well, now that the introductions are over, I'd like to know what you think you're doing." "Becoming immortal, Doctor." "By draining the cosmos." "Is there another way?" "Haven't you worked out the little flaw in your plan? Sooner or later you'll run out of matter and energy to devour. You'll die in the end anyway, so why not let everything else live?" We will continue for eons. In that time, we will find a solution. No, you won't, said the doctor impatiently. You can't achieve a perfect non-entropic state without perfect stasis, and perfect stasis will be indistinguishable from death. Bodies at rest, as in eternal rest, as in rest in peace. You can only live forever by dying. All paradoxes will be resolved on the quantum level. It's exactly the quantum level you're going to have problems with. That would be true if we were matter. This stopped the doctor. You must be either matter or energy. We are concepts. The sapient race's dream of our transcendent order and timeless perfection. Don't pull Plato on me, said the doctor. If you were only conceptual, then you would already have eternal life. All this energy or robbery would be unnecessary. Where are you finding the energy for this conversation, by the way? You're fairly expressive. I'm expending only the tiniest amount of energy. We are so near to absolute zero that we encounter almost no resistivity. That still doesn't answer my question. You've evolved into a purely mathematical, near-static form of being. You burn out planets and stars to maintain your anti-entropic state. But you must be drawing power from somewhere in your world, or you wouldn't be able to have this conversation, much less contact Brett and Unwin, or make an attempt to pierce the barrier. Some of us, pieces of us, sacrifice ourselves. Then you're a hive mind. Both hive mind and individual. At this level, we form what you know as a Bose-Einstein condensation, many and one simultaneously. And that one is as weak as an infant. Infants cannot gather their own food. It broke into pixels and reappeared partly within the translucent wall, apparently its equivalent of sitting down. You have a great amount of energy, much more than a human. Artron energy. So much, I suspect, it is not all your own. I'm connected to my TARDIS through transcendent biomechanics. Its mouth opened slightly, and a white tongue peeked in and out. That is power indeed. Don't get your hopes up. I'm not such a fool as to come in here with any power you could access. The connection is based on irrational and imaginary equations. Any contact would reduce you to zero, spiral you into infinity. It smiled. As to that, we do not need to go through you, Doctor. Already, we are in your TARDIS's computers, taking them over, program by program. A lie. You were stopped by the firewall. You haven't a code to go further. Haven't we? That brilliant boy is still on your ship. Perhaps you should have killed him. The doctor's eyes darkened. I have no idea what you're talking about. Who lies now? We were inside of him for an instant and found the memory. There's something wrong with him, you know. Yes, said the doctor. I know. But all of this is beside the point. We no longer need the code. Our worm slipped in as you came out. Impossible. I calculated for that. You didn't have the power. Ordinarily, no. But we happened to have the use of the body of Mr. Brett. Our one that died managed to access and transport the condensed energy of his decomposition. Interestingly, some of his personality came with it. I suppose because they had merged. Brett, said the doctor scornfully. You don't really expect me to believe that, do you? But he remembered the state of the corpse. Mr. Brett is now a computer code, our worm. We are, of course, in contact with him. Fascinating information. At a certain point, possibly just about now, this construct of yours was to collapse, and a bolt of Artron energy, with you as the medium, would then annihilate our world. Of course, you would die too, but still. The doctor was silent. It nodded. You're not quite as honourable as your reputation maintains, are you? In a choice between the cosmos and my integrity, I'm happy to throw out my integrity. To the doctor's dismay, the being emerged from the wall with its lower half transformed into a snake. Erect as a fakir's cobra, it rippled to him. You're very good at destroying others' civilizations. Only when they try to consume everyone but their own. I see. You work out the numbers. It smiled again. The doctor wished it would stop. That's why it must have seemed to you quite reasonable to end one small human life. Only I didn't. But you would have. If that girl hadn't come in, Ethan Amberglass would be dead. Even though once you put your mind to it, another way presented itself. Your first instinct was to kill. No, said the doctor, but he'd gone white as the walls around him. Did you really believe we were pulling you in? You were merely seeking your own. No. Morality has its equations too. They graph the curve of compassion between the quick and the dead. There are slivers of ice in your hearts. It swayed up and bent over him. Little doctor, you belong with us.
Thanks again, Craig. Now, the Algebra of Ice was reviewed in DWM number 351, and it was written by Matt Michael. So let's hear what Matt had to say about it. The TARDIS is playing up again. The 7th Doctor and Ace arrive in Totter's Lane 1963. The Doctor is troubled by the name on the gates of the old junkyard. Should it read Foreman or Foreman? In 1849, Edgar Allan Poe dies in the gutter 3 days too early. Captain Oates strides manfully into the swirling ice, but is dragged back to safety by his friends to die a few days later. Vesuvius erupts, but more slowly, allowing the population of Pompeii to escape. Across time, history is changing in a myriad of small but noticeable ways. The opening chapters of The Algebra of Ice suggest that this is going to be yet another case of aliens interfering with Earth's history, but their misdirection. So is the presence of Edgar Allan Poe, who plays no further role in the book whatsoever. This isn't a late addition to the BBC's Altered History arc, nor is it a gothic horror come psychodrama in the same fashion as Rose's other novels, The City of the Dead and Camera Obscura. What The Algebra of Ice is a tie-in to the New Adventures. A missing new adventure, if you like, which feels peculiarly out of touch with the current BBC house style, employed to such great effect in Rose's previous books of character-led fantasy. Rose packs in all the New Adventures cliches. Ace has steamy sex, the Doctor uses her boyfriend in his plan, there are strong SF overtones, and the Doctor confronts the monsters in cyberspace. The author captures the New Adventures style so well that the novel could almost have been written in the early 1990s. Its preoccupation with crop circles, conspiracy theorists, and computer science come from a time when The X-Files was the series of the moment, and paranoia was a form of escapism, not a way of life. What this means is that what the book lacks in originality, it makes up for with nostalgia. This looking back and longing for a simpler time is reflected in the Doctor's sorrow at all he has lost, and his disgust at what he has become, a man who destroys planets and plays games with human lives. The Doctor is strongly characterised throughout, with Rose focusing on his annihilation of Scarrow at key moments to both emphasise how different this version is to his predecessors, one of whom rejected the opportunity to wipe out the Daleks, and how much this troubles him. Throughout the book, the Doctor struggles against his instinct for manipulation, ultimately choosing to destroy himself in a kamikaze attack on the alien enemy rather than sacrifice another innocent. For all his talk of being an alien, this is a very human 7th Doctor. The rest of the small cast are equally well fleshed out. Ace is spot on, right down to the monologue she gets about her miserable adolescence, so pitch perfect that you can almost see Sophie Aldred delivering the lines, gazing, dewy-eyed, into the middle distance as the other characters stare at her, looking slightly concerned. The other key character, Ethan Amberglass, is like Adric, but good. A conceited and highly strung mathematical genius whose brilliance endangers the universe. Amberglass's ambiguous relationship with the Doctor and his unambiguous relationship with Ace give a real emotional depth to the book. The plot is the kind of thing Christopher H. Bidmead was straining for in Season 18. The aliens, whose presence is generally felt rather than seen, are mathematical concepts given form. Their goal is similar to that of the Logopolitans, except where the Logopolitans sought to drain entropy from our universe, the aliens want to draw energy into theirs, creating a sort of universal freezer where they can exist in stasis forever. Where Rose wins out over Bidmead is in the lucidity of her explanations, achieving in a few pages what Bidmead took 4 episodes to, sort of, put in plain English. Very different from Lloyd Rose's previous novels, The Algebra of Ice is not as striking, but makes up for this with exceptionally strong characterisation and a clearly narrated and intriguing plot that confirm Rose as one of the very best of the current Doctor Who writers. So that's what the review of the time of publication said. Let's have a look on where this book stands in the current day. On Goodreads, it's got a rating of 3.68 from 121 ratings and 13 reviews. Of these, 5 stars 18%, 4 stars 38%, 3 stars 36%, 2 stars 5%, and 1 star less than 1%. And in fact, I've had a look, and it was only one person who gave it 1 star. So let's see what everyone has to say. Well, not everyone, because they would be here all day. But let's have a look at some edited highlights. 5 stars from Daniel Kukwa. A Doctor Who BBC Books novel that is both a homage to the previous New Adventures range and a damn fine study of the 7th Doctor and Ace in its own right. Lloyd Rose seems to know these characters as well as her own family. A book that manages to be sensual, thrilling, dark and gripping, all at the same time. 4-star review here from Nicholas White. Lloyd Rose is a particularly good Who writer who has published no other written fiction as far as I can tell. She has a non-fiction piece in a 2013 Sherlock Holmes anthology and a couple of TV scripts. This is the last of her works that I have come to, having already greatly enjoyed The City of the Dead and Camera Obscura and her audio play Cerdroia. I'm glad to say that I really enjoyed this one as well. It starts with the death of Edgar Allan Poe, and from then on there are a lot of balls in the air. Crop circles, weird ice, the Brigadier, the Ryman hypothesis, Ace having a fling with a brilliant mathematician, the Doctor as a partially successful manipulator. Also, the flavours are both the last TV seasons and the first New Adventures novels, inform the narrative and combine for a very tasty treat. I'm not completely certain that I can tell you what the book was about, but it satisfied me on a lot of levels. I have met Nick. I met him in Gallifrey a few years ago at the convention out there in LA, and I do apologise for my appalling attempt at a slightly Irish accent. There's a 4-star review from Mark C. Mark C says, "This book reads like one of the Virgin New Adventures from the early 90s and, to that end, follows the remit of that series, which was to produce stories too broad and too deep for the small screen. On one hand, it's quite a small-scale story that wouldn't look out of place in the current series. It's primarily set on present-day Earth, and there's only half a dozen or so characters in the entire book. But the villains of the piece, essentially sentient equations, and their world are definitely something that could only be properly realised in book form. I can't say that I entirely followed all the mathematical discussions, but fortunately that didn't get in the way of a good story." And here's a 3-star review from Jean. "Okay, so I'm a little biased, as my 2 other Lloyd Rose books, most notably City of the Dead, have special positions on my bookshelf, so I was obviously looking forward to the Algebra of Ice immensely, even though the PDA have always been a rather iffy, mixed bag. I wasn't disappointed. The story was surprisingly tight, though it had the tendency to shift, as all of Rose's books do, rather suddenly. I felt, though, that it worked here, as she was clearer on the plot, very tight on the prose, and excellent in characterisation. As a matter of fact, it's not the Doctor or Ace who make the book at all. It's an original character, Ethan, the mathematician, who really is the heart of the book, though it would be unfair to deny Ace's role, as her relationship with Ethan provides a startlingly personal look at the material. Ethan's mysterious illness is wonderfully handled and pays off at the end, as one assumes all along that it must be the impending alien invasion that is causing it, which turns out in fact to be false, and once again takes us to a very human place. Brett is a fantastic baddie, in the best sense of the word, and I had this strange image of Toby Stephens playing him, just gnawing at the scenery. Too often lately, I've found that sci-fi likes to show us the grey areas, as they call it, why a villain is doing something, how it's really deep and emotional, even if disagreeable. Brett is a nihilist. He's doing it because he can, and most of all, because he's bored, because life isn't up to his standards, because every character in the book is in some way avoiding truly living, whether it's out of fear, Ethan, or disdain, Brett. As the Doctor observes at the end, Ace really is the only one in the book who ever really was truly alive. Not to say the book doesn't have its drawbacks, however. It's a complete regression to the New Adventures days, with the Doctor's 7th incarnation having all the fun sucked out of him, showing it for what it supposedly truly is: manipulation. I was never crazy about that particular line of thinking. Ace is sometimes shown to be cringingly naive, and I suppose we're supposed to be moved by the way she doesn't recognise the way she's being played. I thought we solved most of this in The Curse of Fenric and Ghostlight, but alas. Rose claims that she didn't know if she could write Ace, and it shows terribly sometimes. But all that aside, this was just a fantastic book. I finished it in 2 sittings. Why only 3 stars? Because of the heavy focus on the original characters, as complex and wonderful as they were to read about. I originally gave it a full 5 on Amazon. I'm thinking I'm somewhere in between now. So there we go. Thank you very much, Jean. So if you've enjoyed this episode, or indeed this book, you could always comment on our social media. We're on Facebook in our Power of 3 group. We also have a Twitter at Power of 3 Pod with a number 3, and we're on Blue Sky at Finished Zine, FINISHEDZINE. We also would be grateful if you want to leave a review for us somewhere on your podcatcher of choice, because we haven't had one in ages, and it would be very nice if you did. If you're a regular listener, we like to finish off with a tune in each episode. And today is going to be no different, but I couldn't decide which to go for given we've got Algebra and Ice in here. So I was thinking initially of Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds, Think of a Number, and then I was thinking also of Clapton's Queen of Ice, featuring the Canadian act Dizzy, and I thought, well, I like them both, so let's have them both. They are great tracks. I've been Kenny Smith. We'll be back very soon. Until then, take care. Bye.
Let the world fall off my shoulders.